Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be ranking all BTD5 abilities. Now I am ranking this based on the abilities and not the towers. However, I will do that for a later video. I am not ranking any other outside abilities, but I am just ranking the abilities of the towers. Not the towers themselves, but the abilities of the towers. Anyways, I hope you enjoy, and yeah, this was a really fun video to make. Now, starting off with the Super Monkey Fan Club, it can pop a MOB, they can pop a BFB, not exactly, but good enough as you see here. And with enough of them, it can even pop a ZOMG. Here, not everything got popped, but with enough of these, you can pop an entire ZOMG on its own. With all of these, the tower is pretty expensive, so overall, it's not the greatest fan in the world. It's a very weird tower to rank, but I'm putting it at B tier. Next up is the Blade Maelstrom. It can't solo a MOB on its own. Right here, even with 24 Maelstorms, they can't even solo a ZOMG on their own. I could have used the ability better, but I am super sure that they can't even solo ZOMG on their own. Not even 25 can. Thankfully, the one pro about them is that the Blade Maelstorms are super cheap. This is one of my favorite towers, but I'm just putting it in C tier. Next up is the Sniper. What it does is, it just gives you cash. If you have a ton of these, then these can go from situational to your main money-making source. But about money-making sources, it's pretty expensive, so it's not great. I'm putting this at B tier because what it does serve at its purpose is pretty good, but it doesn't do it exactly too well. The Turbocharger is personally one of my favorite towers, but as you see here, it struggles with popping power because it can't even pop a ZOMG, and because of that, it just really lacks. It's like the Blade Maelstrom, but better. It's definitely a good tower, but not one that's amazing. It's definitely not amazing. It's but not amazing. But at least they do a better job than the Blade Maelstrom, for sure. And they are pretty spammable, being pretty cheap. But overall, I'm ranking this at a C tier, definitely higher than the Blade Maelstrom. The Ninja's ability slows down MOB class Bloons for about 15 seconds. Now, the Ninja slows them down for half speed, so what you're seeing here is 50% the speed of a regular Moab. So it's a pretty big difference. They are surprisingly cheap, being super spammable and less than $3,000. While not essential for a really long run, like 150 rounds or so, it is a very good ability that makes things way easier. A tier. Next up is the MOB Assassin. It's able to pop Moabs, doing a lot of damage to them, and with cleanup, it's a very efficient ability. It's a very efficient ability, but the whole tower path can't pop ceramics, so you need Bloon Impact and Bloon Liquefier. And right here, I got 24 MOB Assassins, and they're able to pop a ZOMG without too much of a problem, with cleanup, of course. Aren't that cheap, but they aren't expensive either, so they are kind of spammable, and with a lot of them, you can do a ton of feints. It's good, but not essential for a long run. A tier. Next up is the Ice Tower's ability. It slows down all classes of Bloons except ZOMGs, and it does a pretty good job at that, but it doesn't slow down ZOMGs, which is why it isn't that great. The Ninja's ability actually does slow ZOMGs. It's pretty spammable, being $2,000, which actually makes this not that bad. It's okay. Even if I did put this in B tier, it would be really low, so I am putting this in C tier because the Ninja's ability is just better. Next up is the Glue Gunner's ability. It's not the best ability in the world, but it does slow Bloons down by a little bit, so that's a good thing. But it doesn't slow down MOBs at all. And it's more expensive than the two other abilities that slow down feints combined, so that's a double minus. Definitely could understand having this in C tier, but it's just outclassed by a lot, so it's going in D tier. It definitely isn't cheap, but in the right circumstances, it is pretty affordable. It cannot pop non-mob class Bloons, and it can pop ZOMGs as well, but it's definitely a good ability for sure. I'm putting it in A tier. Is pretty expensive, but with the right amount of money, a ton, and on No Escape, you can get these pretty easily. Without No Escape, the ground zero is basically required to beat No Escape, but just in general, this ability is great. S tier. Next up is the Tech Terror's ability, or the Super Monkey's ability, and as you see here, it can solo a ZOMG on its own. Unlike Ground Zero, you need a ton of Ground Zeros to solo a ZOMG, but with the Tech Terror, you only need one. And with this ability, it is super cheap, and you need 4 of these to equal the cost of the Temple of the Sun God. It is definitely one of the best towers and abilities in the game. S tier for sure. The Wizard's ability can solo a mob on its own, but with some trouble, as you see here, it didn't get all of it. With a bunch of them, they can kill a ZOMG. Right here, I didn't get all of it, but with twice as more, they can definitely get all of the ZOMG, even the mobs and the ceramic insides. While definitely not cheap, they are pretty spammable and affordable with the right kind of farming. While definitely one of the abilities that I had a hard time ranking, it is pretty alright, it's good, but definitely has some big disadvantages, like not being able to get ceramics that well. I'm putting it in B tier. Now, the MIB, it is a very good ability. As you see, the Dart Monkey can go from not even soloing a pink, but with the buff, it can go to soloing a zebra on its own. But it is very expensive, and you need really good farming to get it often and consistently. It is an A tier ability for sure. It's on the very verge of S tier, but the high cost does hold it back. This is one of my favorite abilities because, as you'll see in a little bit, it stopped the ZOMG. Only for a little bit, but the stop time is insane on BFBs, Moabs, and other Bloons. For what the ability does do, it surprisingly isn't that expensive, being $9,000. I am personally ranking this as S tier because it has saved me a ton of times in a lot of runs I have had. And with what you just saw there, it is also very freaking expensive, bro. Like, oh my god! I mean, with what you just saw there, at the very least, this tower can hit mobs. D tier. Next up is the Spike Storm ability. It can't solo a ZOMG on its own, but it is a great support tower, dealing extra damage to mobs, and overall just helping you stay alive a lot longer because it can get rid of sneaking Bloons going for your defenses. It also isn't that expensive, so you can place many of these down for more results. I would put this at A tier if it did a little more against ceramics, but it's a B tier ability, but it's really good. Next up is the Helicopter's ability. There are two very good things about this ability because, number one, it gives a good amount of cash. It can move towers that you have placed, and it gives a really good feint. Lives. It is kind of expensive, but with what I just mentioned, it's super worth it. I'm gonna be honest, it's probably the best ability for long-term survival if you want to last for as long as possible in a run. S tier. The Overclock doesn't really do much because it goes from popping a pink to not even being able to pop a white, as you'll see here. It is cheaper than the MIB though, so if you want to go for it, then you can go for it. Overall, I am putting it at B tier for it working, but not being as good as the MIB. B tier. Now the balloon chipper's ability. I know I'm giving too many ceramic balloons, but it's supposed to suck up them, and it kinda sucks at doing the suck. It isn't terrible when it comes to price though, being $6,000, but it isn't cheap either. Overall, I am putting it at a B tier because it's good at what it does, but what it doesn't do well at all. It costs a lot, but for being able to pop many ZOMGs, I'd say it's worth it by a ton. I am putting the sub in its own tier, and this is the final and ordered tier list. You can agree or disagree with any of my picks. If you do disagree, let me know in the comments. This is my first time doing a video about something like this, so let me know if you like it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya!